Eric's Story, Part 1.
Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of the Building a Refuge podcast, otherwise known as The Bar. Eric, how are you doing?
Great, man. How are you?
It's great to see you, man.
Good to see you, too.
Before we get rolling on this, as we always do, I want to shout out to LDR Studios. Clark
is the man.
Yay, what's up?
How you doing, buddy?
Good morning.
We always,
afternoon.
that's right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're not really sure exactly what time it is here when you're in LDR Studios.
That's right.
That's right. It's dark in here.
We don't need to know.
As long as you just feel that good energy, that good feng shui, and Clark brings that to the building.
He does.
Clark is now a part of the band. Dustin's a part of the band.
Yeah, we thank you for our shirts.
Yeah. Sydney soon will be a part of the band. I mean, that's coming. But I want to go back to Clark because his new name here is Clark A.
Yes. Oh, here.
Yes. I love it. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. But if you could go out and check us out on Facebook, you can find us at Building a Refuge, or definitely check us out on YouTube, where these will be coming at. These and many more will be coming at you. You can find us at Building a Refuge. Eric, before we always get these going, we always like to, at least say thank you to our veterans, of course, right?
That's right.
But
That's right.
just if you are struggling, you can text the word refuge to 494949, and then you can also utilize the National Suicide Awareness Line by texting 988. That's new, which is pretty good. A little bit easier for folks, I think, that are struggling. Dial 988 or text 838-255. So dial 988. I apologize about that. But
there you go.
We've had you on before, Eric, so appreciate you back.
Yeah.
This is going to be kind of interesting to walk through this, I think, slow roll it anyways. But
yeah, we were talking earlier, this is going to be the first time where I've put my entire story together in one thing. I've told bits and pieces here and there, and this is going to be a good day. Tough day, but good day.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what this is all about, right? I mean, as we've kind of shared with other folks before in the past, our mission is really one story at a time.
That's
and really in that, we hope we can bring a little bit of hope to folks out there listening, so we appreciate that. We appreciate everybody here helping us out. So Clark, Dustin, Sydney, thank you.
Yes, thank
Sydney,
you very
by
much.
the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't just mention this. Thank you, Sydney. Set us up on TikTok, which is pretty awesome.
It's pretty crazy for a couple old dudes.
Couple of old dudes, right?
Yeah.
One, you have more hair here, and I have more hair here,
Yes.
which is weird, right? It's a little yin and yang, but that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but you can check us out on TikTok at Building a Refuge, and I was told not to give our password away, so I won't do that.
Please don't do that. Yeah, don't do that.
No, but Eric, thanks. Listen, man, I know this is tough for you sometimes to walk through. It's probably say all the time. I shouldn't say sometimes.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you being able just to kind of sit back and kind of walk through this. And you've had quite a journey. As we've shared in past episodes, you and I have known each other for a long time. So I've heard some of this. Some of this may be a little bit new, I think. But I think for our listeners, I hope anyways that it is helpful.
Yeah.
And
Me too.
I think it's a pretty encouraging story by all means. So.
Well, it's really cool to be here in this relaxed atmosphere and doing this in this format, because normally I'm either in front of a lot of people or I'm in front of a guy who's struggling telling my story. So this is a little bit different for me in the fact that I just get to shoot the shit with you. And it'll be good.
And hopefully with a bunch of our listeners, right?
That's right.
I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
That's the goal. I mean, I think that's what's cool about this is being able to actually, hopefully somebody out there listening can kind of relate, right? And, your story connects with somebody and they listen in a little bit more often. But, I mean, I just am humbled, like I said, probably, by knowing you as long as I've known you guys and our connection. But with no further ado, I'm just going to kick it over to you. Maybe you can kind of jump into the story and let us know where things started and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start where everybody starts, where they grew up and, where all that started. I grew up on the west side of Indianapolis. Great family, great upbringing. My mom and dad were hugely supportive in school, sports, everything. They were great. They are great people.
When you say west side, where's that at? 'Cause
You're from Avon, but I'm from the
Oh, that's right.
the upper scale,
Now
Plainfield.
It just rang a
Yeah.
bell with me. Plainfield.
That's right.
The Red Pride.
That's right.
That's great. Yeah,
Red
yeah.
Pride. I could sing the Quaker Fight song for you, but I won't do that.
I cannot sing the Avon Oriole fight song.
I won't do that to you.
That's right.
No, but grew up there. At that time, it was a pretty distant suburb. Now it's kind of been swallowed up by Indianapolis. But my parents, like I said, very supportive. Have an older sister and a younger brother that get along with very well. And after I graduated high school, I went to Ball State up in Muncie, the Harvard of the Midwest.
Chirp.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
right.
And had way too much fun up there.
As many people do, I think.
Yeah,
Right? It's not
yeah.
called Funcy Muncie for nothing.
That's right. I think I just barely got above a 2.0 my first semester. Went on academic probation. Second semester, got kicked out of school.
Oh.
Yeah, and so got in the car. I went home, told my parents that I had gotten kicked out of school.
Okay.
My dad, 30 seconds later, we're sitting in the car going right back up to Muncie. Because
We're gonna figure this out.
We're going to go sit down with the dean.
That's right. That's right.
And I'll be damned if we didn't.
That's
We
right.
sat down with the dean, and somehow the salesman that he is got me back in school.
All right. And what year was this?
That was 93.
Okay.
So I graduated high school in 92.
Okay.
So I was up there my freshman year and still didn't graduate with a really good GPA, but
Yeah.
it got a lot better from there.
So how long were you on double secret probation?
Well, you talking about with my grades or with my fraternity? Because my fraternity was like, it was a train wreck, man. Like we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we, I have, and still to this day, have very close friends. Some that live out west, some that live here, and they're just good dudes. And have remained friends with them for a long time. And college was an awesome experience for me.
Yeah.
I really loved it. So after college, well, actually, I should take a step back. Right before college is when I actually met my wife.
Okay.
She and I had mutual friends.
Not at Ball State.
Yeah, at Ball State.
Okay,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, at Ball State. So I met her at a party 2 weeks before I graduated. And at that time, I had an apartment, and I was ready to go out west. And so when I got that, was at that party, and I met Jen, a couple days later, I decided I wasn't going to be going out west.
Yeah.
So stayed here, got a job with a great company out of school. I was an engineering recruitment firm.
Okay.
Here in Indianapolis, and just absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I worked for them for quite some time, and then got promotion right before I got married, which took us down to Houston.
Mm-hmm.
So we literally got married, had our honeymoon. The day we got back from our honeymoon, we left and moved to Houston.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a whirlwind for Jen and I, but it was really cool because we were able to get away and just the two of us.
That's where you learn how to do crawfish boils, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
Man, it was fun. It was
Yes,
fun.
sir.
But it was the company that I worked for was real young. They recruited virtually everybody straight out of college.
Okay.
So I went from college to more college.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and we had a really good time.
Yeah,
We had a really
yeah.
good time in Indy before I left. Then I went down to Houston, and we had a really good time down there, and it was a lot of fun. But then we decided we were thinking about having kids and wanted to have them a little bit closer to home. Really enjoyed where I grew up here in Indianapolis, and so we just decided to say, hey, let's go back up there. There was a position open up here, so we relocated back up here after just short of 2 years. I think it was a year and a half, 2 years, somewhere around there. But Houston was a good time. It was a lot of good people.
Yeah.
A lot of good times, a lot of good memories.
Was that when you landed in Fishers, or were you somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we moved straight up to Fishers.
Okay.
And actually bought the house that was right next to you.
That's when you guys came back.
Yeah. So we had come.
I may have burnt too many brain cells since then.
Well, me too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when we moved back up to Indianapolis, we lived with my parents for a short period of time just because we were trying to sell our house. Right about the time we moved back was when Enron happened.
Oh, wow.
And for the older people out there, they remember Enron.
Oh, yeah.
Enron was crazy.
Yes.
And I was in a recruitment firm at that time, and there's a there's a famous picture on the front of the Houston Chronicle
Yeah.
that has people wheeling their stuff out of their offices with a box on chairs like we're sitting in right now.
Yeah.
Right out the front door of this giant skyscraper that Enron was in, and 2 of my contractors were in that picture.
Oh my gosh.
It's a real famous picture.
It's a real famous. I'm glad you're not in it.
Yeah, and nobody really knows that, but 2 of my contractors were in that
yeah.
picture. So it was really rough at that time down in Houston for that. But we were eventually able, I think after, I don't know, 6 months or something like that, to sell our house. And so we were able to get rid of that. We moved up to Fisher's in the house on Eller Commons, right next to which we've talked about in previous podcasts.
Yeah.
Where you and I were neighbors, and just kind of settled in.
Yeah.
There wasn't really, a lot going on immediately when we moved up. But then I took another job at another recruitment firm, and then we found out we were pregnant with my daughter Mackenzie.
Sure.
And so that was when things kind of changed for me. The partying, the going out, and all that stuff. Just kind of went by the wayside because there were things that were a little bit more important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think back at that time, and Sherry and I, as you said, we lived right down the road from you guys.
Right.
And it's just wild how you kind of live around. You meet new neighbors, you become friends, and here we are today. Right. I mean, and the journey has been
20-some years later.
Yeah. I mean, and the journey has been. If somebody would have told me about it, I certainly would be like, yeah, you're crazy. There's no way.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we took that new job, and in my previous job, I had a boss of mine that had gotten involved in real estate and was doing a few deals here and there. And he said, hey, you should look into that. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm not really interested in that. I've got a full-time job. But he kept on me, kept after me, and so I had this idea in my head. I was going to do a couple houses here and there, and maybe get a house and rent it out, and eventually that would pay for my kids' college.
Right.
Just no aspirations at all to grow anything that had to do with real estate.
Yeah.
But I caught the bug quick.
Yeah.
We did 3 or 4 homes in the beginning, flipped them so we could have cash, and then we started, renting them out, and it was that was 2005. And man, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. It was crazy. Yeah. It was the wild, wild west when it came to that.
Let's go back. Let's go back really quick though. When you left the recruiting firm, you mentioned that you had a friend that was doing this. Had he been doing it for a while, or how did he kind of get into it? Or
no,
did you guys just kind of hear like, hey man, this is kind of a hot market. Let's maybe partner up here and get into this. I mean, I remember it, but. I mean, that time frame from this was probably what, like 96, 97-ish?
Well, when we started really doing it, it was like 2005.
Right.
And there was a lot of stuff going on in Indianapolis at the time.
Yeah.
There was a lot of vacant, abandoned properties downtown.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on with real estate.
Yeah.
And so it made it, the inventory was just, there were so many houses.
Right. But you were only in the house at Eller for 3 years-ish? 4 years?
Not long.
Something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't long at all.
Yeah.
And then we moved further west in Fishers and up to another house.
Yeah.
And that's when we moved away from, hanging out with you guys.
Yeah.
But, the real estate thing became very interesting to me. It represented a lot of stuff because I think I had 2 or 3 houses, and we had Mackenzie had a newborn, and I loved so much the 3 of us hanging out and the 3 of us doing things together. And my job at the time was very demanding.
Oh, yeah.
So I spent a lot of time in the office.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time away from them.
Yeah.
And it just got more and more under my skin that I was having to do that. And so eventually I saw real estate as a way to not have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And eventually, over the course of probably a year or 2, we decided to make the leap. At that time, my wife was a teacher, so we were able to kind of rely on her benefits and that consistency of her check coming in. Yeah. So it was a little bit easier.
So you made the leap from really that office job, right, office gig, into going, hey, I'm gonna do this real estate deal full time.
Full time. Yeah. Yeah. At the time, I think we had 7 or 8 properties, and I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. I had no clue, but we had a little bit of cash.
Yeah.
We had a line of credit, and we said, hey, let's go.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was me and my dad. You know, my dad was kind of financing the back end of it. And he was enjoying the lake life down in Sweetwater and retired and letting me do my thing. And so we got really involved in real estate. I went at it hard. Had some people that were not partners of mine, but we were kind of doing the same thing, and so we were feeding off of each other and just getting an idea of really what this Indianapolis market looked like. Because it was. I mean, at the time when I was doing that, there was a lot of people that were getting into it.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate to have guys who had been in it for a little while who were kind of mentors of mine I was able to learn from their mistakes.
Was it a pretty competitive business? I mean, was it a pretty competitive space?
There was so much inventory.
Yeah.
The inventory was crazy. I mean, I think the highest it ever got, there was if you stopped listing houses on one day, there was 6 years worth of inventory for the average amount of homes that were sold in a month. 6 years. Yeah. Just in Indianapolis, the greater part of Indianapolis, the donut counties and Center Township. Yeah. So there was a lot, but a lot of them downtown were, dumps. Yeah. They needed to really be knocked down. Right. So it was a good time to get into it just because of the inventory and what was there and the banks that were doing loans and all that stuff. It was a great time to get into it. Yeah. And so we grew that thing between 2005 and 2007. Actually, the beginning of 2008, we ended up having like 85 homes here in Indianapolis. Yeah. And so we were going at it full time. There's just myself and 2 other people. Yeah. And so it got to a point where it was quite a lot to handle.
Well, I'm sure it was.
It was a lot. We had 85 rentals. We were doing some stuff down in Florida. Not much, but it still that takes away from your focus a little bit. So we had a lot going on.
I'm gonna throw a curveball question at you.
Uh-oh.
We probably didn't plan for this one, okay?
All right.
So Clark's looking at me like, oh God, what's he gonna ask? In kind of context, right, to what we're doing with building a refuge, we talk a lot about the competitiveness of the world, almost, right? Yeah. And why maybe guys do what they do. Mm-hmm. Looking back on it now, do you see or have you kind of seen that, man, I was in an industry that not only was probably really hot, the market was probably hot at that time, if you think about that time frame from really 97 to 2007, right, in the real estate space, but more so from a standpoint of like what it made you feel like as a guy, like control.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to say I'm better than somebody, but like, hey, look at what I'm doing, kind of on that level, because I mean, I think, and I'm a little bit, I know a little bit here, right? So, but when I hear you talking, that kind of jumps out at me as like, man, this space was probably pretty, spotlight-ish, I guess. Like, hey, look what I'm doing here.
Yeah. It was a badge that I wore pretty proudly. I was a real estate investor. Yeah. And it's funny because my wife and I can look back now and we can be like when we first started this thing, I remember my dad and I sitting down on the couch and we were talking about, okay, if we do this, what are we doing it for? Yeah. What's, and this was just, hey, we're going to do a couple houses. Right. Well, first thing was we were going to do it as a ministry. We were going to do it and try to give back. Sure. To people who were struggling. The areas of the town that we were buying in were socioeconomically just a little bit lower. Yep. There were some people we knew that were struggling. Yeah, yeah. And so we were going to do it for that. And then it kind of, you can watch itself grow, and you can watch my ego and my pride grow. Yeah. Right along with it, right in step. And we went from ministry to, okay, I'll do a couple houses for my kids, and then holy crap, look at the inventory that's out there. We're going to do 5 more this month. Yeah. This thing is freaking lucrative. Yeah. And I was going right along with it. Yeah. And I probably had 5 to 10 houses. Yeah. And I was like, I'm a real estate investor. Oh yeah. And I let everybody know what I was doing. Yeah. Because when you used to say that, it was, okay. Yeah, like,
I think what's interesting. Yeah, no, I get it. I think what's interesting is that like when you're going through that time of life. You're young, right? I mean, you're in your mid-20s or whatever. You're climbing the, you know, the I don't want to say a corporate ladder, but you're climbing that ladder of success going, man, this is good. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm rocking it. You know what I mean? Look what I'm doing. And when you kind of look at this big picture, right, that we'll get to, because I know here we're really kind of splitting your story up into two parts. Yeah. But I mean, this part of it is important. I mean, because I think it is such a piece of your life, Erik, that like I think for people listening have to grasp a hold, because I'm sure there's many of us out here. I mean, you do it in this light, you chase these things, right? They may be in a little bit of a different avenue or whatever, but you're still chasing it. You know what I mean?
If you look at my corporate life, you know, 7 years, 6 years in corporate life, I did the same thing. I did the same thing. I had a very quick, like, I got promoted very quickly. I ran divisions very quickly, and I did all that stuff, and I ate that shit up. I loved it. I loved it that people looked at me that way. I loved it that I was doing that. Now, I did work hard. I wasn't just handed to. I wasn't just handed, and I worked hard in real estate. But you know, it's kind of one of those things. I loved it. I loved the idea that people thought I was successful. And my wife is still to this day and never has been a materialistic person. But I became one. And things that were really never important to me started becoming important. And you can see it in the houses that we moved into. The cars that we moved into. And the things that we did. And I had no business doing that. Because I wasn't making the kind of money that equated to what I had, like what I had. Because in the town that we live in, the area that we live in, it's very affluent. And there is expectations. There are, you know, keeping up with the Joneses, and I kept right up with them. And when my business started to grow, it grew fast, but the things that I was buying, the things that I was doing, along with my ego, was growing faster than what my business was. And in, like I said, in early 2008, I mean, if you go from 2005 to 2008, and you got 80 some homes, the effort involved in that, the amount of time, the amount of hustle that you have to do to get that done, is crazy. And not only that, but to keep them rented out, to rehab them when the people move out, you know, and we were doing full rehabs on every one of those houses when we first purchased them. And so there was a lot in it. I had a superintendent, I had a bookkeeper, and I kept 4 to 5 crews busy all the time. So we were rolling all over Central Indiana.
And as you mentioned, this is now around the 2006, 2007 time frame that you're in, when you're kind of this I would say capacitated anyways, from a standpoint of having that much, you know, work going on.
In my mind, I was a big fish in a small pond, but it was actually very opposite. You know, because the guys that were doing, you know, that I talked about, that were doing the same thing that I was doing, they were doing equally as well, if not better. It was fun to be in that circle. At the time. And that's really the if you peel back the onion on my story, that's kind of where it starts. And that's where, when you get to the core of it, it's my ego and my pride. And that appears and shows up at all parts of my story that we'll be telling. And it really, I remember one day I was driving down the road. I was going to one of my properties, and I had just purchased a car. I won't say what kind of car, but I just purchased a car that I had no.
It wasn't a 1989 Mustang, was it?
It wasn't, but I wish I would.
Was it a Gremlin?
It was not a Gremlin.
I wish it was a Gremlin, Clark.
But I will just say.
Oh, wait, hold on. It's good. Clark A.
Clark A, yeah. But I will say that it was a badass car.
I got you.
And I'm pulling into our houses, which, if you knew where our houses were, I had no business, number one, owning that car. Number two, driving that car where
you drove
houses,
it.
And I remember pulling up, and the crews, that they looked at me like, they didn't look at me like, oh, that's a badass car. They looked at me like, what the hell are you driving? And I just remember vividly seeing that. And like, man, like it didn't make me feel good.
Yeah.
You know, it made me feel real good driving it around.
Yeah.
But the way people looked at me that really knew who I was, because I'm a jeans and, hiking boot type guy. I'm not that car kind of guy.
Yeah.
And it was just out of place. It was out of touch. And I kind of felt like it. We bought a big house and we had the cars and all that stuff and we were rolling.
Yeah.
I mean, and the marriage was good. I felt like I was a good dad.
Yeah.
I felt like that freedom that I was striving for, we were getting there.
Sure.
I was still working a lot, but I could work when I wanted to.
Yeah.
I could do the books when they went to bed or whatever, and it was just a little bit more flexible. So I felt like I was doing what I was trying to accomplish.
Yep.
But in actuality, I was just creating another thing that was in the way.
Yeah.
And really that started to rear its ugly head in 2008.
Okay.
2008, again, for the older people in the crowd, was a really bad time all the way across the country. And really didn't start till later in 2008. But
that's right.
In this market, the Midwest, as far as real estate is concerned, is quite a bit different than the big four states. Arizona, California, New York, and Las Vegas.
Yeah.
That real estate just goes, ebbs and flows like crazy. Here in the Midwest, it stays pretty consistent. I mean, there's going to be a 3 to 5% shift in it.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but 99% of the time, it's the ebbs and flows. That's why real estate investors love it.
Yeah.
Because it stays pretty.
Yeah, it's stable, somewhat stable, anyways. Yeah.
And so, in the beginning of 2008, when everything started to hit the fan a little bit, I didn't feel it as bad, and the guys around me didn't really feel it as bad because we had things done the correct way. We had things leased out, we had money in the bank, and so if we had somebody move out who was maybe a double income, we were okay.
Yeah.
A couple houses here, you could go back in and rehab them, spend $1,500, go back and rehab them.
Right.
But man, I'll tell you what, end of 2008, beginning of 2009, it just seemed like everything came to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
Like it was overnight. And I just remember sitting on my couch in my house and being like, what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah.
Because it was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
It is, and for those of everybody that lived through it, imagine not having just your own personal house, but 80 homes to worry about. And having to worry about the fact that the areas that you bought in and the tenants that you put in, most of them were 2-income families. And those people were losing their job left and right. And so I was trying, I was kind of operating the business with my heart more than with my head, in that situation. So I was letting people stay in the houses a little bit longer than they should have. Longer than they could have. And it really hurt us. From a standpoint of being able to even try to release those houses, to get into the houses and try to fix them up and try to put them back together in order to release them.
And this is only 12 months, right? I mean, roughly 12 months after, kind of things were rolling.
Well, I mean, in 2008, like mid-2008 is when it really started.
Yeah.
By the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, like it hit the fan.
Yeah, you're talking 12 months.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, then the values were dropping, and it took longer to sell the houses and all that stuff.
Well, the biggest issue that we had was we always maintained quite a bit of equity in our properties when we purchased them after we rehabbed them. Well, it was the appraisals that were the difficult thing. Because they weren't accepting appraisals that were even anywhere close.
Yeah.
So you couldn't refi to try to pull any cash out to try to do rehabs or do anything. You couldn't find tenants because they couldn't qualify because they didn't have a job.
Right.
And most of the people that were moving out had been tenants of mine for a year, 2, 3 years sometimes. And you go back into those houses and you got to put carpet, you got to put paint, you got to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it just adds up.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when you get a phone call and 10 of your properties go vacant in one time, it's not just one $1,500 rehab, it's 10.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it's $15,000 instead of $1,500 to go in there and rehab those things. And it just...
And then backfill them with tenants.
And then try to backfill them, which you can't.
Yeah.
And so it was a perfect storm. And I'm not the only one that went through it, but it was painful.
Yeah.
And when we made it to the end of 2009 before I had to call it quits.
Yeah.
I had to say I surrender.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was probably the most difficult time in my life up to that point.
Okay.
Where we couldn't, and I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I had no idea what to do because at that time real estate was dead.
Yeah.
I hadn't recruited in 5 or 6 years. Nobody was hiring. So I'm sitting on my couch just in a pure internal panic.
Yeah.
Because my wife.
Well,
knew.
yeah. I mean, you're at a time of life, man. I mean, you had Mackenzie, I know.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Nate,
you had, was probably pretty young.
Nate was born in 2005.
Yeah.
I had 2 kids.
Yeah.
So they were both born when Mackenzie was born when I was in the corporate world, which I was doing very well.
Yeah.
Nate was born right in the middle of my real estate uptick.
Yeah.
So we had money. They knew that.
Yeah.
They always had something.
Yeah.
Always had stuff. And so it was a difficult transition to be able to think, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And now, granted, Jen knew things weren't well, just because the balance in the checkbook was getting smaller.
Yeah.
But I hadn't shared anything with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hadn't shared, all the things that we're going through with my crews, all the things that we're going through money-wise.
Yeah.
My dad and I were communicating, and I wasn't really sharing everything with him because I didn't want to worry him. That's during this whole time when I wasn't sharing anything and I wasn't really communicating with people, it was so I wouldn't hurt them.
Yeah.
So that I wouldn't worry them.
Yeah.
For the last, 10 years, 8 to 10 years, Erik just provided.
Right.
It was always there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted to be that guy where it was always there, no hiccups, no nothing. Anything you needed, you could go get.
Yep.
And that just wasn't the case anymore.
Yeah.
And there was an incident. I remember, I think Jen was going to the grocery store, and she went to the grocery store and had a ton of groceries and went through the line and couldn't pay for them. And she called me and she's like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Well, I'll get you some money, tomorrow or whatever."
Yeah.
But how embarrassing. For
Yeah.
her, And she doesn't care,
Yeah.
man. And she's like, "Okay, cool."
Yeah.
And I apologize left and right. And she's like, "Erik, don't worry about it. It's fine." And I know it was incredibly embarrassing, to go through that. But the things that she had to deal with coming up went way past embarrassing.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, the checkbook started getting, the balance started getting a lot smaller. So I had to start having a little bit of conversation with them, her about what's going on. And we had a couple scenarios where we were able to get some money. We were able to do it and kind of put a Band-Aid on it for a little while. But it was never a scenario where we could get our head above water.
Yeah.
And so mid 2009, I gave up.
So let me look. In this time frame, are you managing any properties at all now, or are you completely out of managing properties?
Well, we were still. it was a how can we get money today?
Mm-hmm.
It was a what tenants are paying and what can we do. And we had mortgages and all this stuff.
Yeah, of course.
So we were defaulting on the mortgages. We were late on payments. We were doing terribly.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm trying to manage that. There was people that had investment dollars with us who I lost money to, money from them.
Yeah.
And so I'm fielding phone calls from them. I'm fielding phone calls from the bank. I'm fielding phone calls from my crews. Or be like, "Hey man, we need some work.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have it. I can't afford to, have you guys come on and do anything." So it's like all this stuff all at one time is just coming at me. And I had no idea. I'd never dealt with that before.
Yeah.
I had never dealt that with really, truly any kind of failure in my life.
Yeah.
The biggest failure that I had experienced in my life was failing out of college.
Yeah.
But my dad got me right back in.
Yeah.
So really it was a ride up to Muncie that was scary as hell. And after that he fixed it for me.
Yeah.
And I just really had never done it. I was decent in sports. I was great in my career. I'd grown a successful real estate business, but now this is the first time where I'd really like.
And you were 30, what, 32, 33?
Man,
somewhere in there?
It's Ball State math. I don't remember. But
I was trying to do the math from when you got kicked out of college until this time frame. But
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
But
you were in your 30s, though. I mean,
Yeah.
you were probably in your young 30s.
Yeah. And so I had a lot of unknowns. There was that fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And that's a scary thing for someone who's never dealt with it before.
Oh, yeah.
So I was trying everything that I could possibly think of, number one, so that I could get money. Number two, so I wouldn't have to tell my wife.
Right.
Because
let me ask about that. I mean, was it more, or maybe was it two parts, right? Were you apprehensive of telling her because you were worried of what the response would be, or were you more so concerned with how it would have made you look?
both.
I suppose it's kind of one and the same, but
Yeah. I was always the provider.
yeah.
And I'm not able to
I mean,
provide.
that's a bit. I mean, that goes on a lot today. I
Yeah.
mean, you know what I'm saying. I mean, even when
Yeah.
you parlay or you kind of correlate that to the stories that we've heard for one.
Absolutely.
But I mean,
Time and time
guys
again.
are typically, the man in a family usually is the one. I mean, not always, right?
Yeah.
Just seems that way.
That
Maybe
expectation's there.
and maybe it's
Yeah.
the optics of it too. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I mean, it just seems that way. That the man sometimes, or in a lot of cases, is the breadwinner, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's
And
the
the
way,
strength.
Well, and that's the way your and my generation grew up.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what we were taught.
That's
what
right.
That's what our parents did, and and that's just the way we did it, and
Yeah.
that's what was expected, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I think things are changing and for the better.
Yeah.
But at the time when I was failing, I was the provider.
Yeah.
Because my wife took 7 years off of teaching, so she wasn't even working at the time.
Yeah.
So we had nothing, like zero money coming in.
Yeah.
What money was coming in, we were trying to pay the mortgages, and we were trying to pay our mortgage, and like just trying to keep our head above water, and all
Sure.
this, and also trying to keep a little money in the checking account so she didn't have to go to the grocery store and get embarrassed.
Yeah.
And that, what that did was that time where she got embarrassed at the grocery store was a time where I got really scared because I was like, wait a minute, like she's gonna start asking questions.
Yeah.
And she's gonna start wondering what's going on. She's gonna start doing it, and then that's gonna snowball into my dad asking questions, and I got to fix this thing before the questions start coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there was no fixing that.
Yeah.
There was no fixing what occurred. And so
Listening, like, I don't know if you and I have spent this kind of time, digging in. I like I said earlier, I knew some of this, right? But
Right.
I mean, just listening to you, man, it gives me like some internal, because
Oh,
I mean,
dude,
I felt it. Yeah.
I kind of
Yeah.
like I'm reliving it
Yeah,
right now, and
yeah.
that's part of the fear in telling this whole thing is
yeah.
I never really have to get so deep into it
Yeah.
to where I can really feel that.
Yeah.
Like I can see myself like online paying those mortgages.
Yeah.
And just being scared as hell that payment's not gonna go
Well, I mean, listen, man, I'll tell you, I've probably told you a million times, thank you. But, I mean, the organicness, I think, of this, Clark, and that's one of the things that we've mentioned many times, of being able to just come in and do this, man.
Yeah.
The organicness of this kind of naturally comes out. And I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that, just kind of listening to you up until this point
Yeah.
of where you were at, because it's a scary place to be in. Ooh.
Man, it's
I mean, we were laughing about it. It's not, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, because whenever there was any kind of, it wasn't always rosy.
Yeah. No, I got
leading
you.
up to those multiple properties that we had.
Yeah.
And there was always times where it was scary, but I always knew there was an upside.
Sure.
There was no hope whatsoever of an upside.
Yeah.
Like I said, everything that I'd done in the past,
Yeah.
the real estate market was dead. When it comes to a downfall in the economy,
Yeah.
the first thing to stop is recruitment for companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was no options for me that I had done in the past.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't, I didn't know if I was going to be bagging groceries. I didn't know what it was. And that's okay if it was, but I was like, where I was at with my ego and my pride
Yeah.
and what I was a real estate investor.
Right.
I wasn't going to go back.
Right. In your mind, you built yourself up to
Damn right.
7 foot tall,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, walking in proud every day.
Right.
I think what's really cool, Ben, for folks that are listening to this, I'll say, listen, there's a second part to this, right? Because there's a lot here.
Yeah.
What's really interesting to me is that as we're sitting here talking about it, there's this there's Erik, and then there's Erik and the family.
Right.
This part of it really seems like this is Erik.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, it's all Erik.
And I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I'm blessed to know your wife, your kids, and
Yeah.
you know where you all are at, right? Like I know how strong of a family you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this really feels like Erik.
It was all Erik.
Yeah.
Because I created my own little island.
Yeah.
Like my own little cocoon. And I did that over time. Basically, I mean, I was working by myself, and
Yeah.
you know, like I said, I had those other guys that I was talking to and everything.
Yeah.
But like when you work by yourself, it can be a lonely place.
Yeah.
You know, and it can be a lonely thing. But when all this stuff started happening, I was like, you know, just kind of recoiling.
Oh, yeah.
You know, into my own self.
Yeah.
And there was nobody around me. I look back at the pictures around that time, our
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
pictures and Christmases and all that shit.
Yeah.
And you couldn't tell. You had,
Yeah,
you had
I
no
know.
idea. I had the biggest freaking smile
Sure.
on my face and everything. And Christmas was hell. Like Christmas was, because there was an expectation.
Oh, yeah.
that we had big Christmases because we
Yeah.
had all those years before.
Yeah.
And somehow, I don't know. I mean, it was credit cards. It was all that stuff that we put it on there. But I put that facade on too.
Yeah.
And so it was all those things, and you know, opening up gifts, thinking, oh, that costs that much.
Yeah.
That costs that much.
Yeah.
Damn, that credit card bill is going to be high. You know, January's going to suck, and I had no way of paying that.
Yeah.
I had no way of doing that. So
or any idea how you were gonna, right?
No
like
clue.
just like, man.
no clue.
Yeah.
No clue. And so, unfortunately, in let's see, what would have been 2010,
Mm-hmm.
we had to declare bankruptcy.
Okay.
And so that was soul crushing.
Yeah.
Like it was, but prior to filing bankruptcy, my wife, she had just started a job working at a preschool.
Okay.
She went to work for a friend of ours in a preschool.
Yep.
And she had just started it, and a wrecker pulls up in the
Oh, in the
parking lot and repos our van, our family van. You want to talk about pride crushing. Like,
Yeah.
And she's calling me, you know, crying, saying, hey, what's going on? You know, and I was like, I tried to play it off, and she's like, I said, we paid it, you know, and I knew in my mind we hadn't paid
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so they took it. And then I had to go down to the wrecking yard or whatever that's called,
Yeah.
and get all our stuff out of the
Impound.
van.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had to get all our stuff out of the car and relinquish the car. It never happened to me before. You know,
Yeah.
nothing like that had ever happened to me before. So now I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so we had to file bankruptcy. We kept our house out of the bankruptcy, so we were able to stay for a little while.
Right.
And it in November of 2010,
Yep.
I had some issues with my jaw for several years, and I didn't know what it was, and I finally found out what it was. I had some bone resorption in my upper jaw. And
Okay.
it was a maxillofacial surgery
Yeah, yeah.
that I had to have, and you know, I got 16 pins in my upper jaw and 4 in my lower, and so I had this surgery in November of 2010,
Right.
right in the middle of all the bankruptcy and all the failing of everything, and you know, the fact that I knew we weren't going to be able to make our mortgage payment. I just knew it. There was nothing for us to do, but I had to have the surgery done, and so had the surgery done, and I recovered from it in my basement.
Mm-hmm.
And it was terrible and nice all at the same thing, because I could escape.
Yeah.
Like I was down there for about a week or so.
Yeah.
But slowly but surely, from the beginning of the week to the end of that first week, you know, and I was all rubber band shut. I had braces at the time because
Oh,
I
wow.
had everything. So I was rubber band shut. I was drinking freaking Enfamils and tomato soup.
I'm glad you're laughing about it.
It sucked. But
I don't know if I would be. Yeah.
I can't eat tomato soup to this day.
Oh.
But I drank, liquids and stuff,
Yeah.
and I lost all kinds of weight and atrophy in my muscles and everything. And I'm recovering from it in my basement. And my basement in our house, really nice, and we had a TV room set up and all that stuff, but it was very dark.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, that was soothing for me. Like it was comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and it was also an escape.
Oh yeah.
I could escape from having to answer questions from my wife,
Yeah.
from my dad, from the investors,
Yeah.
from my superintendent, who I was going to eventually have to let go.
Yeah.
And he was my best friend from high school.
Yeah.
And he didn't have anything either.
Right.
And all these people were depending on me, and all of a sudden I went dark. And I told my wife, I was like, at the end of that week, there was a slow progression. Once you're out of something, you can look back at it and you can be like, damn, man, like the first couple days it was nice. Day 3, this is kind of boring. Lights are staying off.
Yeah.
TV's on.
Yeah.
I'm escaping, getting phone calls.
Yep.
Putting my phone on mute. Day 4 and day 5 were kind of getting worse. They were like, I told my wife, I was like, hey, I don't, the kids don't need to see me like this.
Right,
I was
right.
in bad shape. I wasn't eating. I wasn't really communicating. She was bringing me meals. My liquid meals down to the basement, and I was just really struggling.
Sure.
Watching game shows and shit on the TV, and just
Probably can only watch so much Bob Barker.
yeah, just completely escaping.
Yeah.
And so she would come down every once in a while. Kids would come down every once in a while, and I got to a point where it got so dark that I was like, honey, I don't want the kids to see me like this.
Yeah.
I don't want you to see me like this. So just throw some Enfamils in the fridge, and I'll see you in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Because I just can't. I just couldn't deal. There was so much anxiety and so much depression and so much guilt from what had transpired the last couple months that I couldn't deal with it.
I mean, I'm sure your mouth, the surgery thing. I mean, that's just I know it was an added top to it, right? But I mean, no one necessarily listening to if that's probably what the core was of everything that was happening. I mean, that's an instant of it, but
what that surgery did was it took me to my basement.
Yeah.
That's where I recovered.
Yeah.
And that was a good thing in the beginning and a really bad thing at the end.
Yeah.
And we talk about, on this podcast, we talk about at our events that we have, we talk about and talk with guys who have suffered through depression, who have suffered through a lot of stuff. And so I can empathize with them, and I can feel for them because I live that, and I went through that, and I went through that dark, foggy time where it's very difficult to explain.
Yeah.
So I won't even try to, but it was a dark time.
Do you think? Looking at things now, right? Looking at things what we've learned over the past 5 years. That when you look back at, I'm sure I know kind of the answer to this, right? But when you look back at it, how, you can see how easily it is to get to that place.
Oh, yeah.
If you kind of stack up the timeline, right? Listen, there's nothing wrong with chasing careers and being successful and doing all those things,
That's
right?
That's right.
It's part of the world we live in, and I think it's fantastic. It's success in some definition, right?
Yeah.
But I think that it can be also masked in a way that, from an ego, you mentioned it, right? Pride, all those things that kind of guys deal with, because we all deal with them.
Yep.
They can really become something different. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
it became something real different.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole ego and pride thing, I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
No one had ever really talked to me about that.
Well, hell, back in 2010, 29, whatever, man, nobody was talking about kind of mental health and listen, I think back, if there was anything like this, right, than what we're doing or other organizations are doing. I mean, hell, if you look at some of the national, sporting leagues today, they address mental health head on.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know what I was going through. I thought it was temporary. I thought it was this'll, that old adage.
Yeah, suck it up, let's go.
Yeah, this too shall pass. I mean, that was my upbringing.
Yeah.
That my dad was an amazing football player and track star in high school.
Yeah.
And so, and with my sports and everything, like it was one of those things like pick yourself up, dust yourself off, grab yourself by the bootstraps and get going.
Right.
And that I wasn't able to do that. Like I physically was not able to do it. All times prior, I did that. Like that's what happened.
Do you think more of that had to do with the now what you know today, right? Do you think more of that had to do with the stresses on your body from the anxiety and the
100%.
depression and losing
100%.
everything that you'd worked for, or the face surgery, or the mouth surgery, or what have you?
All of the above.
Yeah.
It was chemically inside of me. Something was jacked.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of our co-founders, Tommy. I don't know how to define that even to this day.
Yeah.
But I do know something. I do know this. Every time prior to that, I was able to do that.
Sure.
I was able to pick myself up. I was able to dust myself off and deal with that shit.
Yeah.
That day, I couldn't. I sat on the couch and I just slumped over and I just was like, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
Shit, I couldn't even turn the television on.
Yeah.
And it was unexplainable to me, and I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
That was day 5 or 6. Day 7, I started having crazy thoughts in my head.
Yeah.
I started thinking, you know what? My beautiful wife and my 2 kids don't deserve this shit.
Yeah.
They don't deserve to have to be drugged down by me.
Yeah.
They don't deserve A, B, C, D, and E. I mean, if I told you everything that was in my head that day, like it's scary stuff.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, I remember the day 1, I remember them playing upstairs.
Yeah.
And you could hear footsteps all over the place.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, it'd be nice to be up there doing that.
Yeah.
It'd be so nice, but I can't.
Yeah.
I can't let them see me. I can't let them see Dad this way because, and they wouldn't have cared.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have cared. They just wanted me there.
Yeah.
And so when I started to have these thoughts, in this first day where things really got dark, I started to. They progressed. Day 2 was, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
How can I do this and not be a burden?
Yeah.
How can I do this and it be gone quickly?
Yeah.
How can I do this and not have my wife find me in a mess?
Yeah.
How's that possible?
Yeah.
And crazy things start going through your head about how do I want to be found? How do I want to be seen? What are people going to say?
Yeah.
But with all those thoughts that went through your head, you just knew, I knew,
Right.
that it had to be done because I was a burden.
Yeah.
In every sense, if you looked at family, being a dad, being a son, being a father, being a friend, being a business owner, I was a burden in every single one of those things.
Yeah.
There's nothing positive that you could have told me in any of those
Yeah.
that would say that will keep me here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Let me ask you this. So this time now, you're into 2010?
10. Yeah.
2010.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned at the front end of our episode today,
Yeah.
we're doing 2 parts of this.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of blown away because I don't know if I've heard some of this, right? And
Right.
and I know I've heard some of what's coming,
Yeah.
but there's still a lot more
Yeah.
in your journey
Yeah.
up until really 2016, 2015,
Right.
when you and I met,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So you're going from a time frame of being super successful,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And we'll just say it. I mean, and I think, and what I'd known from you, a pretty successful business, great marriage, great family, kind of the dream that you have, right? That anybody has.
Going to church, doing ministry, doing all the right things.
Right.
Check, check,
and
check.
and really having kind of the world flipped on its ass. I mean, flipped.
Yeah. In about 6 months.
Yeah.
And it was so quick, so overwhelming, that it was hard to believe.
Yeah.
You know, it was one of those things where I just sat there and like, how the hell did we get here?
Yeah.
How did this happen? And there are several times coming up in the next few years where I've said that same thing. How the hell did we get here?
I know.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
And so that
I mean, for folks that are listening right now, man, like I know you, and I know what is you're getting ready to be faced with.
Yeah.
In a whole different light. Like, this is crazy because I mean, listen, we've shared how much time together talking, and you know, building a refuge is something that has been near and dear to your heart when we started this thing, near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
What I'm blown away by is some of this that I didn't realize, you know, between those time frames. Because, I mean, you and I didn't talk, dude, for 16 years.
Yeah, this is all going on.
Yeah.
You know, when you and I weren't in communication.
Nuts.
Yeah, you weren't.
Like, just
Crazy. And it wouldn't, to be honest with you, Brandon, it wouldn't have mattered if you were there or not.
I know.
Everybody was out.
Yeah.
I didn't talk to anybody. And I had friends calling. Like I said, we were going to church. You know, this time we went every Sunday, and I would put on this, you know, ear to ear, and no one knew what was going on.
Yeah.
No one had a clue of what was going on. And then when that basement thing happened, and we got to that second day, and those thoughts got darker and darker and darker, the third morning when I woke up was the day, and I knew how I was going to do it. I knew what I was going to do. And that third day, I remember my wife was getting the kids ready for preschool.
Yeah.
Getting Mackenzie ready for school and Nate ready for preschool. And she was getting ready to go to work.
Yeah.
And my wife, like, she was upstairs laughing with the kids. It's, you know, early in the morning.
Yeah.
Laughing with the kids, giving them breakfast, doing the things that, you know, if you ask her right now what she was doing at that time.
Yeah.
You know, what was going on upstairs and what was going on downstairs. She was being a mom.
Yeah.
She and a dad.
Yeah.
You know, she was doing my job, and she didn't have time to focus on me.
Yeah.
And we've had that conversation.
Yeah.
And it's a rough conversation. So she was up there doing our job, being a great mom, doing her thing, and all she was doing was going to another day.
Yeah.
It was another day for her.
Yeah. Getting the kids getting ready to go.
And in my mind, that was it.
Yeah.
We were done. And I remember her getting up, getting the kids ready. She yelled down, "I love you."
Yeah.
And I was like, I said, "I love you." And I immediately thought that's the last time she'll hear me say that.
All right. So listen, we're going to put a hold right here because I love you, man. And I can't tell you how much I am grateful for you to share this with me, because I know, one, it's tough.
Yeah.
But I think for what we're doing and who we're doing it for, and I think the goal and what we're trying to do, man, I know it's going to get to someone that's going to hear these type of stories, and they're going to understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're going to be able to relate to this.
Yeah.
We have a second part of this coming up, and I'm grateful for you to be able to share this first part, because I think where we're at right now, and again, knowing kind of the rest of this story, I would encourage listeners just to listen into this second part of this, because it is a story of hope.
It absolutely is.
Every story I think that we do on here, and Clark, thank you for recording it in this manner, because we've never had an avenue to do this, so I appreciate you being able to help us out doing it. But it is. I mean, these stories that are super challenging, they're real.
Yeah.
But we're able to tell them, I think, in a light, and share them now in a mission to hopefully, you know, bring some hope to some folks. So
that's the in my mind, that's kind of the fear of splitting this thing up.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure that people know, yeah, listen to the second one, because the stories that we tell,
Yeah.
and the thing that we promise is our stories end in hope.
Yeah.
And there is
Amen.
hope.
Yeah, that's right.
And there will be hope. Just hang with me.
Just hang with us. All right, Clark, we're gonna put a pause on it right now. Thank you, my friend.
All right.
And we'll look forward to the next episode, part 2 of Erik.